I never expected my 10-hour journey for Thanksgiving to end in heartbreak and isolation. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. My heart raced as the train rolled forward, promising reunion and warmth. But with each jolting mile, I felt a chill creeping in. It started as a typical trip, crowded cars, chatter blending into a comforting hum. I watched families, couples, laughing and sharing moments, their joy a stark contrast to my own growing unease. Seated across from me was an elderly woman. She clutched a frayed scarf, its colors fading like her spirit. I could see her trembling hands, and silently wished I could offer comfort. My phone buzzed incessantly. Mom's messages popped up, "Where are you? Dinner's getting cold." Each ping drove home the urgency of my journey. But the train began to tremble unnaturally. I felt my heart thud harder, the air thick with an unseen tension. Whispers floated around us, rumors of delays, of something wrong ahead. Then it happened. The sudden lurch of the train made me grip the seat. The lights flickered down, plunging us into a hush. It wasn't just darkness, it was suffocating silence. I could hear my heartbeat, pounding in my ears like a war drum. Someone gasped. A child started to cry. My stomach twisted. What was happening? We waited. Moments stretched into eternity. I glanced out the window, craning my neck to look at the darkened landscape. Shadows loomed outside, unfamiliar and menacing. My mind raced with possibilities. Were we stuck? Did something happen? The sweet aroma of turkey and pie faded into my memory, replaced by a growing dread. Faint whispers emerged when the emergency lights flickered back on. Confusion and fear ignited in everyone's eyes. I caught a glimpse of the conductor, his face pale, murmuring to a frantic passenger. What was wrong? Suddenly, the thought struck me hard, what if I didn't make it home? Electric energy pulsed around us as the passengers shifted, anxious and restless. I could sense the collective anxiety, a living thing waiting to pounce. Then a voice broke through, clear and panicked. They said there's been an accident. What kind of accident? My chest tightened, and I felt the tears well up, the lump forming in my throat. Would I really be alone this holiday? And then it hit me. For all the laughter and warmth I had yearned for, what if this loneliness was just the beginning? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference, let's connect. The murmur of fear swept through the train like an electric current, and I gripped the edges of my seat, nails digging into the worn fabric. The humidity of anxiety hung thick in the air, wrapping around me as I desperately tried to focus on anything other than the growing pit of despair in my stomach. The elderly woman across from me caught my gaze, her eyes glistened with unshed tears. In that moment, we silently acknowledged our shared predicament, the loneliness clawing at our hearts. I edged closer to her, unsure of what comfort I could offer, yet wanting desperately to bridge the chasm of sadness between us. Do you have family waiting for you? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She nodded slowly, her fingers absently tracing the edges of the scarf. A granddaughter, she murmured, her voice trembling like a fragile bird caught in a storm. We had so many plans for Thanksgiving. She was so excited to try my recipe for pumpkin pie. My heart ached at the sweetness of her memories, contrasting sharply with the harsh reality surrounding us. I wished I could take her pain away, but it felt selfish to even entertain that thought when my own heart was still beating loudly in my chest. The lights flickered again, but this time they bore an undesired glow, revealing the anxiously awaiting faces. Some passengers were on their phones, trying to extract news from the outside world, while others exchanged hushed conversations. The woman's eyes shimmered with fear, and I sensed the dawning realization that her Thanksgiving might not come to fruition. "What if we're stuck here forever?" she said, her voice breaking. "Forever is a long time," I replied, more to comfort myself than her. "We'll get there, we just have to hold on." With each passing moment, the news trickled in: an accident on the tracks 2 stations ahead, delays stacking on top of delays. Our dreams of warm dinners and loving embraces began to feel like distant stars, flickering and out of reach. Yet, amidst the mounting despair, a small voice in the back of my mind clung to hope, echoing the secret that perhaps we could still find a way out of this mess. As the hours crawled by, the tension permeated our little universe. Passengers shared meager snacks and awkward smiles, forming fleeting bonds amid the chaos. A young couple began to sing melodies of holiday cheer, their voices ringing out, as if to chase away the shadows lurking in the corners of our hearts. Laughter bubbled up from a group of children in the back, their innocence igniting fleeting moments of joy, moments that felt borrowed in a landscape of uncertainty. I turned back to the woman, determined to anchor her through this storm. "What is her name?" I asked, as I watched the spark of elation flicker to life in her eyes. "Madeline," she replied, a smile breaking through the worry as she spoke her granddaughter's name. "She's the light of my life." Just 8 years old, and bursting with energy. In that exchange, we discovered a thread of connection that tethered our spirits together. The waiting room of the train transformed into a shared space of resilience, a fragile yet unbreakable bond that resonated in the depths of loneliness lurking outside. But just as the flickers of hope began to dance between us, the conductor stepped into the aisle, his face drawn and weary. "I have an update," he announced, his voice steady yet carrying the weight of the world. "Rescue teams are working, but we've been advised to prepare for an extended wait." Panic rippled through the carriage, hearts collectively sinking and slumping against the cramped seats. Grasping for any semblance of control, I felt my phone buzz incessantly in my pocket. With trembling hands, I retrieved it and saw yet another message from my mom: "Worried about you. Please call." Was it selfish to tell her I couldn't speak? To explain that 1,000 dreams and plans were crumbling while I sat in this metal box, with the ticking clock, and 1,000 questions? I decided to call, as the old woman squeezed my hand, offering a silent reassurance, as it began ringing. "Hello." My mother's voice surged through the receiver, and I struggled to form the words, to quell the rising tide of panic. "Mom," but the words slipped through my grasp. There was no easy explanation. Frustrated tears threatened to spill, as I felt the weight of the moment crash over me. Then, abruptly, the train jolted, eliciting gasps and shouts. The uncertainty flared anew, but in that heavy breath of confusion, something shifted. There was a new rumble from outside, a sound that hadn't been there before, one that whispered of movement. Hope rekindled and flickered like a candle in the darkness. But along with that hope came a whisper of fear. Was this the beginning of a new chapter, or just another twist in the long tale of disappointment that seemed to shadow my journey? As I glued my attention to the window, holding my mother's voice in my other ear, a shadow passed by the glass, unfamiliar, ominous. I felt my heart rate quicken, anticipation clawing at my chest. What lay ahead? Would we ever reach our destinations, or would this nightmare swallow us whole? And in that moment, unshakably, I realized that I was not prepared for the truth that lay just around the corner. waiting to unleash itself upon us all. The rumble outside quickly turned to an unsettling silence, the kind that wraps around you like a chilling fog, stifling any sense of reassurance. I could still hear my mother's voice, soft and concerned, but my focus shifted back to the train's window. My heart raced as I squinted into the dim light filtering through the glass, searching for answers in the shadows. What had been a cluster of hope grew heavier, entwining with discomfort. Androids might explain this strange paranoia, but instinct screamed something was off. The elderly woman beside me squeezed my hand tighter, sensing the change in the atmosphere, her own anxiety blending with mine like ink in water. "Something's happening," I murmured, my eyes darting back to my phone, where my mother's voice continued to echo. The world outside the train felt like a fragmented reflection, a mirror of our expectations shattered by reality. "Mom, I need to." Before I could finish, the train lurched violently, metal screeching against metal, and the lights flickered ominously once again. Fear, palpable and suffocating, clawed its way back into our hearts. "Is everyone okay?" a voice cried out from the other end of the train, breaking through the tense silence. A wave of concern washed over the passengers, and in that moment of uncertainty, our fragility laid bare before one another. I hung up on my mother, unable to trap myself in a conversation without conclusions. The noise echoed louder, but I focused on the woman beside me. "We'll be okay," I insisted, even as the doubt snaked through me. I could barely convince myself of that shaky promise. "We need to find out what's going on," she said, her resolve shimmering beneath the fear. "I can't sit here any longer." The determination in her voice was both a comfort and a call to action. The train car buzzed with chaos as more passengers stood. Some rushed to the windows, faces etched with worry, while others leaned into hushed discussions filled with speculation. I joined the others near the glass, and what I saw chilled me to my core. A line of emergency vehicles stood along the tracks, lights flashing like a macabre disco in the stillness of the night. Men and women in uniforms moved with purpose, their faces tense and focused. The train had stopped, but we were straddling two worlds, the familiar and the threatening unknown. "Stay calm, everyone," the conductor's voice commanded once more. "We're assessing the situation. Please remain in your seats until we have more information." The call was a feeble attempt to settle an ocean of tempests roiling inside each of us. I glanced at the elderly woman, searching for a connection to hold onto amidst the turmoil. Her eyes shimmered with an inner storm, echoing both fear and something akin to fierce resolve. "Can I tell you about Madeline?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the chaos unraveling all around us. "She loves stories, you know. Especially the ones with strong characters." I nodded, enveloped in her warmth, even as uncertainty loomed in the air like a spectre. "Please tell me," I urged. Her story flowed, embodying each detail with a vibrancy that transported me to a world far removed from the panic at my side. "Madeline loved to climb trees," she would say, her laughter ringing like bells as she narrated the wild adventures of her granddaughter, who would persuade all the neighborhood cats to join her in her escapades. As she spoke, I allowed myself to be immersed in the enchantment of her words. My heart softened as I engaged, sharing my own memories of family, laughter, and holiday traditions. The more we connected in that fragile bubble, the more I began to forget that we were trapped in uncertainty, flesh and bone. But as a new siren wailed outside, the tension crept back in, roughhousing our imaginations with visions of what might unfold. I could see a few passengers stratifying their emotions. Some began to complain, while others wept quietly into their hands, their distress boiling over. Just then, the lights on the train blinked again, shadowing my optimism. A low murmuring around us attracted my attention, revealing the scene evolving toward the front of the train. Someone had begun to shout. Someone has to do something. We can't just sit here forever. The voice of agitation rippled through the crowded space, echoing the panic spreading like wildfire. I felt another tremor of anxiety creep through my heart, as I turned sharply to the woman beside me. We need to stay calm, I insisted, but I could feel my own voice falter, crumbling beneath the surface. A pregnant pause filled the air before she replied, squeezing my hand again and murmuring, "You're right. But what if we're running out of time?" Her words embedded deeply within me, and suddenly, I had a frightening vision of time slipping through our fingers like grains of sand. The once jubilant idea of Thanksgiving seemed to hang by a thread. The warmth of belonging was overshadowed by ominous uncertainty, leaving us suspended on the thin precipice of fate. Before I could respond, an explosion of lights from outside the train caught everyone's attention. The train doors creaked open, and uniformed figures began to make their way inside. While confusion and concern stitched through the crowd, I felt a shiver of dread prick at the edges of my consciousness. As they walked closer, before I could comprehend what was happening, I heard one of the officers say, "There's been a situation on the tracks, it's serious, and we need to evacuate immediately." And with that, hope shattered once again, leaving the uncertainty to hover like an uninvited guest, lingering just a heartbeat away. The atmosphere thickened with panic as the officer's words settled in. Evacuate. The suggestion rippled through the passengers like a shock wave, turning anxious murmurs into frantic cries. My heart raced, my body propelled into a state of shock. I instinctively clutched the elderly woman's hand tighter, an anchor amidst the turmoil unfolding around us. "Everyone, please, calmly step out of your seats." The command rang out again, a desperate plea for order amid the chaos. "We need to assist you, and move quickly, stay together." The elderly woman looked at me, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "We have to go," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. The other passengers began shoving forward, a wave of bodies crashing like a storm against the flimsy barriers of civility we had erected. I wiped the sweat from my brow, disbelief wrapping around my heart like a vice. Here I was, caught in an emotional sea of uncertainty, unable to see if hope remained afloat, or had sunk beneath the chaos. With each hurried step toward the exit, the wait for clarity turned suffocating. The shadows flickered as lights bounced wildly off the cabin walls, disorienting me further, as I followed the elderly woman through the throng. She called out for Madeline once more, an incantation meant to ground her within the chaos. Her story held fragments of normalcy, a fleeting moment of joy that clung to us even as the fear clawed at our throats. "Maddie can do anything," she called as she stepped onto the platform. "She'll be waiting for me with her favorite cookies. I promised I'd bring home the golden pecan pie she loves." But I couldn't share her optimism. A knot of dread settled in my chest. The world outside was frantic, with wails of sirens echoing like banshees across the scene, cutting through the air thick with confusion. The ground felt unsteady, no longer a solid surface beneath my feet. Voices of authority combated curls of uncertainty as officers ushered us away from the train like a herd of cattle, all marked for slaughter. "Do you think we'll be okay?" I asked as I reluctantly stepped off, feeling the cold night air hit my skin like a slap. The warmth of the train, of moments yielding to cherished memories, slipped away, and uncertainty gripped me harder than ever. "I believe we will," she replied, though I could sense her own doubt masquerading beneath the surface. "We have each other," but each word dripped with a nascent hopelessness that assaulted my senses. The makeshift emergency scene sprawled before us, vehicles washing lights over the gravel, shadows slipping like phantoms among uniforms working tirelessly in the distance. The crackle of radios and hurried communication replaced the train's rhythmic sounds, delivering surreal news in fragments. An accident occurred further down the tracks, an officer announced. There are injuries. We'll be evacuating to a safe area shortly. The elderly woman gasped softly, her hands trembling, and I instinctively reached for her elbow, steadying her, as if the act alone could guard against the onslaught of distress. A single tear traced down her cheek, glimmering in the fluorescent lights. "I can't lose her, not now," she whispered, staring into the void beyond us, lost in the weight of her fears. In that moment, the juxtaposition between our small hopes and the looming figures of despair felt insurmountable. An overwhelming longing for home, for laughter around a table filled with warmth, clashed violently with the spectre of reality. I thought of my mother, alone at the station, waiting and wondering. The officer turned to us then, his expression softening as he perceived our trepidation. "Stay close, everyone. We need to form a line, and we'll get you to safety as quickly as possible." His eyes held a glimmer of empathy that reminded me kindness flickered out in the bleakest of moments. Slowly, we fell into line, a mix of strangers, each of us weaving a narrative bound by burgeoning fears and flickering flickers of hope. The elderly woman remained beside me, sharing stories of her granddaughter through chattering teeth, a coping mechanism wrapped in desperation amid the disaster unfolding around us. But before we could move far, an officer braced himself against the side of a vehicle, shaking his head as he received yet more conflicting updates. "Another train is delayed," he announced, panic catching fire once more. "It'll be hours until it can be cleared." There it was, the punch to the gut I never anticipated. Hours? My heart sieved through loops of dread as I imagined my mother, alone at the station, battling her own anxiety. Would she think I was stuck, lost? Forgetting the gathering of our loved ones now felt imminent. "What's happening to us?" I murmured, mostly to myself, but the elderly woman overheard. "What if things don't go back to normal? What if we never make it?" "The holiday won't be the same. Normal is what we make it," she replied softly, a gentle murmur against the noise surrounding us. "Even in the worst storms, we can find our way back together." Just as her words wrapped around my heart like a security blanket, a panicked scream shattered the air, causing every soul present to freeze in their place. "He's hurt. Someone help." Before the crisis of our situation could envelope us entirely, the officers surged forward, and what followed was a turmoil even greater than the storm we first faced on the train. I turned to the elderly woman, my breath caught in my throat, desperate for her comfort, but the palpable panic swirled around us like a tempest, crashing down with every passing heartbeat. In the corner of my eye, I noticed an officer dropping to the ground beside a young boy, cradling him with the urgency of a father. The boy's eyes darted from figure to figure as the air thickened with fear, and as I watched, a thrilling sense of vulnerability surged through my veins. This twist of fate was not simply an accident, it was a crashing wave that turned our journey into a terrifying miasma. "Stay together." The officer's voice rang, as the other officers pushed us away from the chaos. But all I could feel was the weighted inevitability of heartbreak closing in. And just as the storm seemed to reach its crescendo, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a soft, but determined vibration against the chaos. I reached for it instinctively, hope and fear swirling in equal measure, as I gazed at the screen, a single message flashing to life: "I'm on my way. Don't lose hope." For one small second, the universe felt like it had momentarily planted its feet firmly beneath me. But then an undeniable question crushed that flicker of reprieve: who was on their way? In this unforgiving storm where shadows danced alongside despair, who had not yet succumbed to the darkness? The cacophony of panic resounded across the makeshift evacuation site, a relentless tide threatening to engulf us all. I stood frozen, my heartbeat pounding in my ears as I grappled with the implication of that message. Who was rushing toward me in this chaos? The bewildering ambiguity clawed at my thoughts, taunting me with fleeting glimpses of hope, just out of reach. A blur of uniforms and faces surrounded me as officers coordinated the scene. In the midst of that tumult, there stood the elderly woman, her grip on my arm tightening as the urgent cries filled the air. "We need to find a place to sit together." Her voice radiated warmth amidst the cold of uncertainty, yet under it lay an unmistakable fragility. "Please, can we just take a moment?" I asked, not knowing who I was pleading to, the heavens, fate, or myself. The swirling chaos demanded movement, yet a part of me clung defiantly to the hope that another presence could somehow change our reality. I scanned the crowd, seeking familiar faces, desperately wishing for a lifeline amid the sea of shadows. A moment of stillness wrapped around us when the elderly woman grasped my hand, her eyes sparkling with a kind of fierce determination that propelled my heart forward. "If I can get to Maddie, we can face any storm together. You'll see." Her belief felt like a fragile thread, pulling me into her warmth, igniting a flame of courage within me amidst the encroaching darkness. "Together," I echoed, the word weighing heavily on my lips. We needed to stand strong for one another, even while the world threatened to fracture around us. "Excuse me," I called out as a young officer hurried past, but he didn't hear. The noise of the crowd swallowed my voice, and I felt the weight of despair pressing in, a sharpened whisper insisting that maybe we were meant to be lost in this storm for longer than we could bear. Then a sudden chill swept through the air as the sun slipped further behind thick clouds, obscuring the last remnants of daylight. People were beginning to huddle together, families clinging to each other, as individuals grasped for anyone who could share their burden, a silent plea for collective strength. Beside me, the elderly woman continued her soft mantras of faith. "Maddie has always loved this time of year. Thanksgiving is about finding joy in our gatherings." Her voice scarcely rose above the din, yet held within it a strength I wished to embody. As we pressed forward, I deliberately focused on her words, desperately weaving them into my own mental tapestry of hope, as we trudged over the rough gravel, unsure where to settle as officers beckoned those around us in various directions. "Do you think they'll let us go back home?" I ventured, longing for the normalcy she spoke of, envisioning fidgeting with a fork beside my mother at the dinner table piled high with laughter, loving gestures, and humor. Her brow furrowed lightly before she replied, "Home isn't just a place, it's the people we cherish. We can carry that essence with us, no matter where we find ourselves." Before I could gather the wavering emotions her words stirred, another piercing cry hit the fray, this time from behind us, where the boy had been. "My leg! My leg!" I turned to see him, helpless in the arms of his mother, who had collapsed in tears beside him. The sight tightened the knot in my chest. The palpable anguish of another family echoed the very fears that coiled in my own heart. "Everything is going to be all right," she screamed, a mantra much like our own, though her trembling lips belied her conviction. Officers converged like guardian angels, creating a barrier against onlookers, as they worked fervently to stabilize the boy, and just when I thought despair had dug its hooks too deeply, a ripple of good swept through the crowd like an unseen current. People pushed forward, offering blankets, water bottles, anything they could lay their hands on. A young girl slipped through a crack in the throng to kneel and hold the boy's mother, as if to share some of her own strength. Consolation threaded in compassion. My phone buzzed once again. A heartbeat passed as I lifted it, my breath catching in my throat. I had hoped my fingers would guide it accurately this time, revealing the identity behind the message of hope, another ember that could bring me warmth amid uncertainty. With trembling hands, I lifted the screen toward my eyes to read, "I'm almost there." My heart raced with fractions of joy, desperately wanting to cling to that feeling like a lifebuoy in stormy seas. But another deep-seated fear forced me to stumble back into doubt. How could someone reach us in this sea of troubles? While I battled within, the elderly lady's hand slid from my grasp. In a moment of fragile clarity, I realized she found her footing to cross toward the perimeter where the boy lay. She forgot her fear, her burden only a whisper of purpose, as she knelt beside the suffering family, pulling from her abundance of love to tend to their needs. "Are you sure?" I asked desperately, caught between my own unfolding fears and the harmony of tender generosity before me. "You shouldn't strain yourself, not now. Love is meant to be shared, dear," she replied, the corners of her eyes crinkling with warmth, a quiet strength radiating from her. Every heartbeat matters in times like these. And in that moment, I joined her instinctively, hesitating only briefly to set aside my own anxiety, as I took a step toward them, loyally following the invisible thread of connection she spun with each compassionate act. But then heavier footsteps sounded behind us, a commanding voice demanding order among the chaos. As the officers dispersed, new urgency sliced through my thoughts. "This area is now closed off. Everyone must return to the staging area." My heart plummeted, a resounding shadow breaking my fleeting hope. The possibility of separating from the elderly lady or, worse, from the person who was said to be on the way crushed my will. "No. Please," I urged as hands guided me back, battling against the torrent of commands and fear that encircled me like a cage. In that fevered moment, no comfort resided within the suffocating walls of uncertainty, threatening to shatter the fragile semblance of hope I had just begun to build. I bristled against the storms within, wondering how I would find my own way back to safety if the universe continued to sever what I clung to. Just as the darkness seemed to encroach too close, a figure stepped forth from the crowd, eerily familiar amidst the swirling faces. My breath caught in my throat, as it became undeniably clear who was on their way the whole time. From deep within the throngs of uncertainty, hope surged unbidden, but not unaccompanied. I stood arrested in time, knowing it was now or never. In that paralyzing moment, the world around me faded, the cacophony of voices and shuffling feet grounding down to a muted hum. Each familiar feature took shape, echoing memories I had cherished, and yet now danced in the melancholy light of their own urgency. My breath stalled as I locked eyes with Ross. "Don't!" I managed to shout through the noise. My heart raced, an erratic rhythm drumming against the haunting fear that surged within me. I could see him straining against the tension, his brow knitted with concern and purpose, as he pushed through the crowd. "Are you okay?" he shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos and finding its way to me like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog. Yet the question hung in the air, mocking in its simplicity, while simultaneously sweeping away the strands of dread that clung so tightly to me. Before I could form a response, the elderly woman beside me glanced back, her expressive eyes filling with worry as she caught sight of him. "You know him?" she half asked, half stated, while her gentle grip on my hand acted as both an anchor and a lifeline. "For now, yes," I whispered, my mind a flurry of thoughts. How could I risk losing them both in the frenzy of this ordeal? "We need to stay together." Ross's voice broke through my inner turmoil, assertive and grounded. "Let us find a way to where everyone is helping. There are families gathering near the center." He frowned as someone jostled past, eyes wide with fear. "We can't split up. Do you understand?" "Yeah." I bit back the words surging forth, muddled with panic. I needed to let him in, to let him know the hurt clinging to me, but the storm of uncertainty wrapped tightly around my thoughts like barbed wire. At that moment, the elderly lady squeezed my hand, drawing my attention. "Let him be your strength, dear. We are all in the storm together. You don't have to weather it alone." Her voice wavered yet was imbued with an unwavering warmth that encouraged me to breathe, to allow the walls I had built within me to slowly crumble. The ambient noise of chaos surged to a fever pitch again, and as we began to move, I could sense the weight of dread pulling at my feet. We navigated past families who were now huddled in groups, some in prayer, others clutching exhausted children. Each desperate face mirrored my own turmoil, the struggle to hold hope against the ravages of despair. With every step, Ross slid his arm around my shoulder, anchoring my wavering spirit. In that simple act, I felt a flicker of solace, but the residual tension coiled tightly within me. My mind played back memories, a wisp of laughter, a shared secret, moments I used to cherish alone. Would those experiences fade further into the past, or could we forge a new memory amid these darkened days? Ross, my phone, I started, then gripped it fiercely as I remembered the cryptic message. Someone mentioned they were coming, they said they'd be here. I thought maybe we'll figure it out, together, he assured me, voice firm yet gentle. He leaned in closer, close enough to shed warmth amidst the cold reality surrounding us. At that moment, he felt like not just a tether to the world outside this chaos, but a flashlight illuminating a nearby path. But we have to keep moving and stay near the others. I nodded, compelled by the strength of his presence, yet in the silence that followed, my self-doubt threatened to unravel our fragile connection. I had internally resolved to hide my fear, but this storm of uncertainty wrapped around us both now, binding us. We were on the precipice of lost stability. Could we withstand it together? As we navigated through the crowd, I couldn't shake the dreadful thought that whoever was about to arrive might be lost or worse, unable to reach us in time. I clung to the recollection of a familiar face, the assurance of a signal that could alter the very gravity of our situation. "My name is Clara," the elderly woman said, gracefully catching up with us. "Don't lose hope." Her gentle insistence pierced through the fog of worry, urging me to acknowledge the goodness. Flickering within all this despair, just then, the ground rattled, and a distant roar filled the air, shuddering through the makeshift evacuation site. An ominous tremor of panic rippled through the crowd, drowning out the fragile flutters of hope. "What was that?" Panic spiked in Ross's voice, as he pulled me protectively closer, shielding me from the darkness encroaching upon us once again. I turned toward the sound. A portion of the barricade trembled ominously under the distant rumble, and it solidified the fear within me now, taking shape. I could sense bewildered eyes darting around us, children beginning to whimper, mothers clustered tightly around their families, and a surge of officers echoed the tension. "Everyone, stay calm." An officer barked through a megaphone, but the words ran hollow, overshadowed by the growing sense of doom. And just as hopelessness threatened to consume me, a familiar voice broke through the turmoil. "Clara. I'm here. I found you." The wailing tears of the little boy echoed again in the distance, but there was no mistaking the fervor of that voice. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned instinctively toward the direction of the sound, standing amidst the sea of chaos, with paralyzing disbelief etched across my features, was my brother, Michael. His face was smeared with dirt and sweat, but in his eyes burned the unmistakable bond of love and a fierce determination to find me. But behind him lurked an ominous figure, weaving through the throng like a shadow, a figure that sent electric shards of fear coursing through me. Because it wasn't just any figure, it was the person I had been racing to find. And as I stood frozen, the wood of hope splintering beneath me, the fracture in my heart deepened. The figure loomed closer, and amid the chaos, clarity struck with a heavy weight. The person I was desperate to see bore a haunting message wrapped in dark uncertainty. Could we endure this together, or was the storm bewitching me into the arms of heartbreak once again? The remnants of hope that had flickered within me were quickly being snuffed out by the stark reality of Michael's presence. I felt my chest constrict, the air around me heavy with dread, as that shadow drew closer, each step behind my brother a ghost whispering warnings I dared not acknowledge. Panic clawed at my throat, suffocating the words I wanted to scream, wanted to warn Michael. "Clara!" He called out again, his eyes searching the crowd, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows behind him. It felt jarring to witness such unfiltered joy in his voice when my heart was engulfed in chaos. "Stop, Michael!" I managed to shout, my voice trembling as I stepped forward, desperate to reach him, to pull him from an impending darkness. But he turned too soon, and in that moment, a crack of recognition split the air. "Clara?" The figure stepped into the muted light, revealing familiar features, a face that once brought me warmth now radiated uncertainty. It was Jules. The tension in my chest expanded, tightening its grip like a vice, squeezing me into a corner of fears I had hoped to leave behind. "Jules!" I gasped as a myriad of emotions collided within me like a tempest. Anger, fear, betrayal, love, every strand of feeling roped together in a tumultuous knot that threatened to tear me apart. "What are you doing here?" I managed to choke out, each word wrapped in confusion, the questions filling the air thickly with unresolved histories. The memories I had tried to bury surged back, relentless waves crashing upon the shore of my mind. Michael, caught between our two worlds, backpedaled at the revelation. His eyes flicked between us, confusion darkening his expression. "You know each other?" "Yes." "No. It's complicated." I sputtered, veins filled with ice as I faced Jules, recalling the depth of past betrayals, and yet, beneath it all, there was the ghost of affection that wouldn't he quite let go. Memories of laughter and shared dreams crumbled as I drowned in this new reality. Jules opened his mouth, likely to explain, to say something redeeming, but before he could, another tremor rocked the ground again, this one more pronounced, more dangerous. People stumbled, mothers grasped their children tightly, and the officer yelled again for everyone to stay calm, but chaos was already spiraling. "Clara, we should go," Ross urged, pulling me back, his voice urgent and tinged with unmasked concern. His protective grip felt like a lifeline amidst the swelling tide, but my heart was entangled in memories and anger, fighting against the very instinct to flee. "Clara, please. We need to get out of here." Ross's pleas cut through the turmoil, but my eyes were locked on Jules, who had finally stepped closer, an anguished look crossing his features. "I didn't come to hurt you," he said, words heavy with unvoiced admissions. "I came to what? Reopen wounds. You think you can just stroll back into my life after all this and everything will be fine?" Each word dripped with venom, but deep down lay the wretched pang of longing for the person he once was in my life. "Michael, we need to leave," Ross insisted, as he tugged on my arm. But I couldn't move, caught between two worlds, my brother's pleading gaze and Jules's haunting presence closing in like dark clouds. "Clara, please," Jules pleaded, desperation twisting his voice, drawing my attention back to the moment that felt suspended in time. "You don't understand. There are things happening, and enough," I cried, pain ripping through me as I felt the weight of our past growing heavier amid the chaos. The fissures within me widened, the understanding that no matter the history, the fate of this day hung in balance, a tangle of love, betrayal, and chaos pressuring me from all sides. "Let's just go." My voice was shaky, but defiant. If Jules wanted to explain, he would have to come to terms with this new reality, a reality where he was no longer the anchor, but part of the storm itself. Just then, the crowd erupted. A surge pushed against us, and I felt myself being yanked away, but in the turmoil, something struck me like a bolt of lightning. Michael was caught between us, confusion etched across his features, and suddenly, everything around us burst into shrieks of fear, as the barricade began to splinter with the sheer force of unrelenting chaos. In that moment of imminent danger, clarity seeped through me like a cleansing wave. I had to protect my brother. I had to shield him from the repercussions of a storm that had already ravaged me. No matter the choices I had made, this was my chance to guide him away, to offer him safety. "Ross, take Michael," I shouted, urgency suffusing my voice. Go? What? No. I'm not leaving you. His eyes blazed with determination, but the next trembling roar of the earth sent ripples of panic through us, chasing my heart into my throat. Now? I urged again, shoving Michael toward Ross. We'll be right behind you. With a glance back to Jules, I was struck by the longing that seeped through the cracks of my resolve. He opened his mouth to protest, but the ground shook yet again, the reality of our situation, at its breaking point. As my brother was ushered away, I felt the culmination of emotions surge within me, a heart entwined in fragments of love and pain, weaved into the fabric of our very existence. In that cacophony, I managed to catch Jules's gaze one last time, before the chaos swallowed me whole. Don't you dare follow!" I shouted. But deep within me, the tremors of uncertainty faded, leaving behind a resolve forged in the fire of choices made. As the crowd surged, I turned, eyes scanning for Ross and Michael, and that slight hint of hope shimmered in the air. Would it lead to safety, or pull us closer to the dark? But just then, an even more powerful tremor knocked us to our feet, and the shadow of a figure swept past, beckoning with determined strides, cutting through the chaos of debris. A revelation that made my heart both race and plummet at once. The one person I thought I had lost forever was back, striding toward the encroaching storm. And in their presence, a new truth dawned, burdening my heart, as I braced for the impact. As I cried out a name to the universe, the world shifted again beneath our feet, and the echo of what was to come sealed our fate in the tremors of an impending storm. The chaos of the moment surged around me like a tidal wave, and as I hit the ground, my hands cradled my head instinctively. The sound of distant screaming stirred something primitive within me, a primal urge to protect, to survive. How had everything unraveled so swiftly? My heart raced with the echoes of 1,000 emotions, yet among the tumultuous noise, all I could focus on was a piercing clarity. Michael was all that mattered. Clutching my brother's arm, I pulled him closer, scanning the frantic crowd for Ross. Fear gripped him as tightly as it held me, his youthful face etched with panic. "What is happening?" he gasped, glancing between my frantic gaze and Jules's desperate figure that blurred behind the shadow of uncertainty. "Earthquake. We need to find safety," I cried, my voice a desperate rasp. Instinctively, I began to lead Michael through the surging crowds, desperately searching for an exit while the world around us reverberated with chaos. The ground underneath trembled, producing a visceral sense of danger that sent shivers down my spine. My heart pounded in rhythm with the thrumming earth, a grim reminder of our fragile existence. As I looked around, I saw parents instinctively shielding their children, strangers clasping hands, and within all that panic, fleeting moments of humanity emerged. Someone cradled a lost dog. A couple helped an elderly woman regain her footing. "Clara, wait!" Ross's voice broke through the clamor, and I paused, searching for him in the madness. He emerged, gripping a torn piece of paper, his expression a blend of dread and hope. "I found a map of the building. There's an emergency exit in the back." "Good. Let us go." I reached for his arm, pulling Michael along, as we weaved through throngs of people pushing in every direction. As we hurried onward, my heart throbbed with something more profound than fear, a fierce determination to get us to safety. In my mind, flashes of my life before this day bombarded me, hazy moments of laughter shared over hot meals and near constant reminders of struggle marred with love from our family. Trying to grasp them while forging ahead felt impossible, but I clung to those memories as a lighthouse in the gathering storm of fear. We stumbled into a narrow alley behind the building, which surfaced surprisingly quiet against the din of the throngs. I took a moment to breathe, to ground myself. "Check that map again," I urged Ross, my voice now steadier, a fragile thread of courage woven through the uncertainty. He unfolded the paper, squinting through the dim light. "Just a few more doors down, and we'll head straight out." Midway through our hurried search, I accidentally brushed past a figure emerging from the shadows, an unmistakable silhouette. I felt a jolt of recognition flood through me, and the overwhelming mix of emotions surged anew. It was Jules. His eyes met mine, a silent challenge flashing in the space that grew taut between us. "Clara," he called softly, almost a whisper above the chaos, as if the din could drown his voice. I stumbled back, adrenaline surging as I closed my fists, ready to confront him again. "What are you doing here? You should leave." The anguish in my voice registered. It was a plea, an invitation for him to run, to not tangle himself back into my storm. "Let me help you." "You don't understand," he began, but I recoiled. "No, I understand all too well," I shot back, desperation creasing my brow. "It's you who seems to have no idea what's at stake here." "Clara," he insisted again, considerable urgency weaving around his words. "There's something you need to know." Before he could finish, another tremor struck, more potent than the others. I grabbed Michael and pulled him close. "Go. We need to keep moving." I half dragged him toward safety, trying to shield him from the fray, but even as I walked away, my heart hesitated, drawn back by the gravity of Jules's presence. "Clara, please. You're in danger." His voice cut like a knife through my resolve, and for a fleeting moment, I pondered whether I was the one in danger or if it was he who stepped into the line of fire. "Enough of this." I called out to him, laughter and rage mingling in my chest, this moment a cacophony of confusion and noise raking against the semblance of calm I struggled to maintain. I was conflicted, tethered to a past filled with unresolved emotions, and the realization loomed that I couldn't afford to look back. Hastily, we barreled toward the emergency exit Ross gestured towards, but a crushing sense of relief turned to dread as I saw multiple individuals blocking our path, a wall of people who seemed too lost to be willing to help, consumed by their own fears. Desperation clawed at me as I pressed forward, ready to shout for help when my breath caught in my throat. Ahead, a figure broke through the crowd, hands raised, and silence fell like a gentle blanket over the storm. I squinted through the dust, my heart racing a wild rhythm. And then, time froze as I recognized that figure. "Mom?" I barely whispered, disbelief washing over me. The woman who shaped my world, whose embrace had been my sanctuary amid storms, had returned, yet my heart trembled with uncertainty. Had she come back to save us? Or was this the start of another storm? The junction of hope and trepidation pulsed in the air thickly around us. A moment that felt like a lifetime, as I held my brother's hand tighter, grappling with the revelation that would mark us anew. "Clara!" She called, but before she could finish, a fresh tremor rippled through the ground beneath us, and the crowd erupted anew, forcing us apart once more. I felt the pull of chaos, felt it root me in place as a chilling realization swept over me. No matter the warmth of familiarity in her gaze, I had to decide whether she would guide us toward safety or lead us deeper into the storm. And as I looked back, the echoes of my heart entwined with unsaid fears and newfound terror stirred within me, plunging into an abyss too vast to comprehend. The world twisted, reality reforming like the shifting earth. Would we be found, or lost within this tangled journey? "Clara!" The sound of her voice cut through the din, but uncertainty tethered me to the past. The storm was rising once more, and the direction of my fate hung with bated breath, as something deep within stirred, whispering promises that felt both enchanting and terrifying all at once. The crowd surged, a tide of humanity where hope mingled with despair. As I clutched Michael's hand, the chaos swirled around us like some ungodly cyclone, and each tremor beneath our feet felt like an echo of everything I had buried. The sight of my mother, someone I thought I had lost to shadows and doubts, steadied me for only a moment before the reality of our circumstances crashed in. Clara. She reached for me, but the wave of panic swept through the crowd, drowning her words and scattering my resolve. It twisted that familiar warmth into a palpable fear. Who was she now, standing in front of me as the earth trembled? My mom, my savior, or perhaps a spectre of my past? Mom? I shouted back, fighting the urge to run into her arms. To lose myself in the comfort of her embrace would mean risking everything I had just regained. Yet my heart listened, dancing recklessly over the thin line of hope and trepidation. Stay close, I urged Michael, trying to shield him with my body as murmurs of the next tremor traveled through the thrumming ground. My eyes darted between Jules and my mother, caught in a web of uncertainty that threatened to ensnare me. Clara, we have to go. Ross pulled my shoulder, his voice urgent but laced with anxiety. There are too many people. We can't just stand here. But my feet didn't move, gripped by the emotional undertow swirling in my chest. I met my mother's gaze, a mixture of fear and fierce determination reflected back at me. It reminded me of a time when her laughter filled our small home, and her love wrapped us in safety. Yet, that girl had vanished in the haze of adulthood, and here I stood, torn between wanting to trust her again and the raw, echoing hurts from the past. Before I could process it, another tremor rocked through the ground, this one more violent than before. People screamed, a frantic wave of voices rising and crashing against each other, as if the very earth beneath them craved to swallow us whole. Mom? Michael? I cried, reaching out as they both stumbled, caught in wild currents of fear. I locked eyes with my brother, his expression a mirror of desperation and confusion, and for a fleeting moment, I felt lost in this whirlwind of chaos. As I regained my footing, I felt a pull, a desperate need to shield them. Without thinking, I surged forward, grasping my mother's arm. We have to get out. Now? She hesitated, her gaze flickering back to the mass of strangers, searching for something among the chaos. But Jules, he's not our problem right now. I barked, the harshness of my tone surprising even myself. There's no time. Another tremor rumbled beneath our feet, forcing us back into motion. The crowd, ever restless, warped and twisted, spilling into paths unknown. I fought through the confusion, guiding Michael and my mother toward the narrow alley we had stumbled upon earlier. The echo of chaos faded slightly as we navigated through the shadows and debris, my heart pounding loudly against my ribs, the three of us together again in this unexpected domain of tumult. We need to stick together, it's the only way we'll be okay, I urged, my voice urgent, though my heart turned heavy with doubt. I glanced at my mother, lost in her own thoughts, strands of her hair dancing unrepentantly in the wind. And I was plagued with questions: what truth would lie beneath her silence? In that moment, the former warmth between us felt frayed and distant, like a silk string pulled taut, threatening to snap. But before I could utter another word, a piercing scream echoed from the alley entrance. We froze, the world around us shrinking to that singular sound. I peered around the corner into the chaos beyond, my heart racing. A child, no older than 3, stood amid a sea of frantic adults who rushed past, seemingly oblivious, an island of distress caught in the onslaught of fear. Help! The child cried, tears streaming down smeared cheeks, their helplessness cutting through the frenzy like a knife. Instinct kicked in, and without hesitation, I released my grip on Michael's hand, stepping into the fray. Stay here, I commanded, my attention drawn entirely to the child who wandered alone, lost in the swirling chaos that threatened to swallow us whole. Clara! Ross shouted after me, but I ignored him, running toward the small figure whose cries clawed at my heart. As I reached the child, panic danced in my stomach. What could I offer? Just a handful of courage and the shimmer of hope. I crouched before the child, enveloping them in my arms, warmed by their fragile heartbeat against the backdrop of the raging storm around us. "Hey, I'm Clara. You're safe now, let us find your mom together," I murmured, gathering my strength. There was something achingly familiar in their fear, a mirror to everything I had faced. But as I turned back, ready to guide the child, the devastation tightened its grip. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a man with frenzied eyes, the very embodiment of dread and despair. "That's my kid," he shouted, breaking through the crowd toward us, but the turmoil of people flung him back as effortlessly as waves in a storm. In that moment, the weight of responsibility plunged into my heart. Would my heart allow me to stay tethered while the chaos blanketed our lives? Or would I stand as a beacon in this storm, even if it cost me everything? "Clara!" Someone called again, and I felt the earth shift under my feet, a harsh reminder that danger loomed heavy in the air. As I looked into the man's wild eyes, the world around me blurred. I felt lost, not just for myself or the child, but for everyone swept into this storm, for all the heartache and isolation that had led us here. I took a shaky breath, strengthened by desperation and the flicker of hope, and just as the storm of the earth below decided to propel itself into chaos once more, I realized none could navigate this darkness alone. And my next choices, my next steps, could lead me down a path of heartwarming solace or shattering heartbreak. The ground shook again beneath us, sending tremors coursing through my bones. A shattering revelation washed over me as the world flickered and dimmed. I clutched the child tighter, ready to forge ahead into uncertainty, knowing whatever awaited us would test the very limits of love, loyalty, and the power of forgiveness. But the question loomed: when the final wave of this storm subsided, would we find ourselves together on the other side, or surrounded by isolation once more? The chaos beneath me reverberated like a relentless heartbeat, but in that moment, I felt a grounding surge of clarity. My grip on the small child tightened, and as I sought the frantic father's gaze, something ignited within me, a determined flame fueled by the urgency to hope. "Your dad's right here," I shouted over the cacophony, beckoning him closer with every ounce of strength that filled my lungs. Survival instinct propelled me forward, not just for the child, but for every shattered piece of us that lingered in the chaos. The cries and fears swirling around us faded slightly, as his eyes met the wild desperation of that father's heart. He staggered towards us, fighting through the waves of flesh and fear. "Help me," he pleaded, his voice raw, reaching for the child in my arms. "I can't lose her." 3 fragile hearts beat in synchrony, mine, the father's, and that tiny child. I could feel their quaking fear flowing through me, tethering us together in ways we might never fully understand. And in that shared suffering, something greater began to unfold. "Let me bring her to you," I said with a depth of resolve, releasing the grip I had on her. As her small arms reached out with tear-streaked cheeks, she cried, "Daddy." In that instant, the world blurred, muscles curled in fear for what loomed outside our little exchange. Yet the fear began to part as their hearts clasped together, garnering safety amid the swirling storm. I turned, and my chest constricted as I watched them collapse into an embrace, a reunion forged in grief yet tempered by love. Their moment lit a spark deep inside me, igniting a fire meant to cut through this veil of darkness. And just as the raw brightness of connection blazed, another tremor rumbled beneath our feet, stark and unforgiving. "We're not safe here," Ross shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me alongside him. "We have to keep moving." Something deep within me was torn. Michael, my mother, the chaos, a storm of my emotions threatening to tear me apart. But even as that pull darkened my heart, I felt the whisper of courage flutter softly in the recesses of my mind. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about connection, about forgiveness, about finding light amid despair. As we hurried through the shifting crowd, my heart whispered words I hadn't allowed myself to speak. Jules. My voice threadbare, punctuated the air. We need to move. All of us. Come with us. He looked at me, apprehension layering his expression as his world shifted. I can't just leave, he replied, the tread of remorse woven deeply in his voice. You don't understand, then help me understand. Because if we don't leave now, there may not be anything left for us to understand later. I shouted, desperation pooling around the words. I felt Ross's grip tighten around my arm, both urging me forward while solidifying the bond that held us together. At that moment, just as an invisible thread seemed to bind us both, a shudder rippled through the ground, and in a heartbeat, the decision I could veer towards glimmered in front of me. You cannot carry the weight of regret on your shoulders forever, I urged, every sentiment etched within my voice. If we want a future, we have to take this step together, right now. Jules paused, a moment that stretched painfully long. I felt the churning storm subside, and perhaps for the first time, I saw him yield to something deeper, when he turned to the chaos swirling behind us. Fear and guilt washed over him like tide to shore, and from the corridor of dust, I glimpsed the clarity in his eyes. You're right. Let us go. We moved swiftly as one, braving the gathered uncertainty together, he, Ross, Michael, my mother, joining hands amidst the chaos. I could feel it, a tether pulling us toward uncertain safety, a united front formed through the remnants of solitude and fear. Outside, the air felt heavy, charged with desire for survival and connection we had fought for. We stumbled into the expanse beyond the crowd, and as the horizon opened up, engulfing us in blinding light, something shifted in my heart. Hope surged anew, the warmth of possibility creeping back into my soul. There was strength in unity, even amid tumult, and together we could rewrite the narrative. As we pushed toward the parking lot where emergency vehicles blinked like stars captured in chaos, the tightening in my chest began to unclench. We found each other through the wild motions of humanity in disarray, emerging from the storm not as fractured individuals, but as a family reborn through hardship. Michael's hand in mine felt like a lifeline, while my mother's gentle touch grounded me in newfound conviction. In that wild orchestra of life threatening to derail us, Jules caught my eye again, and the remorse that had once haunted us both began to dissolve. We shared unspoken apologies, acknowledgement that we had weathered storms and emerged stronger, and through the chaos and love that exploded around us, I knew forgiveness lay on the horizon. As we huddled together, facing the unknown, a collective heartbeat echoed in the air, vibrant and alive, despite the tumult that threatened to unravel them. Each moment in that embrace, held captive by the storm's remnants, signified love's resilience against fear. I leaned into Ross, my brother, my lifeline, and I whispered, I love you, no matter where this journey leads us. And with that, the final rumbles of discontent faded into the distance, transformed by the love surrounding us into a promise. The world outside still trembled, yet the four of us stood tighter, determined. The warmth spreading in my heart illuminated our chosen paths ahead, flickering a light of hope, and vibrating into the promise of a new family, a testament of love we would carry forward into tomorrow. As the sun dipped low, I inhaled deeply, feeling gratitude encapsulate me, realizing sometimes storms lead us back home, not to places, but to each other, a reminder that amidst the chaos, love always finds a way. And the last thought that filled my mind, as I gazed at my newfound family, the source of this unforeseen journey, was that together, we could be the beacon of light in any storm, even the darkest ones. Wrapped in one another's embrace, we had the power to forgive, to heal, and to find our way back home. Thus, in that moment of stillness, I smiled softly to myself and whispered, love always wins.